Well, hello and welcome back to Ken Miley's YouTube channel. I trust you're well and I hope you enjoy this wee thought for this week. I've been very struck just thinking back to Sunday morning and just the way we respond when we come into church and how are you today and what's our standard response. It's often fine and we walk past and sit down, and often maybe we're not fine at all, but that's our standard response, isn't it, when we're asked that question. And even though we're coming well out of the pandemic now, I guess there's all sorts of stuff that we're still struggling with, and in our daily lives it might be health issues or money worries or whatever, but there's all sorts of stuff that we're dealing with. And I wonder sometimes if we cover that up and put on a front to the world. I've been thinking a lot about some of the Psalms recently, and particularly some of the lament Psalms, and something like 2/3 of the Psalms by David are what are called lament Psalms, where David cries out to God in his struggles and sometimes utter despair. And yet by the end of the Psalm, he's able to praise God again. And you wonder, how on earth can he do that when things are so hard and so difficult? In 2014, I think it was, I had the privilege of visiting Rwanda with a group of staff and volunteers from the Scottish Bible Society. And I mean, there's all sorts of stories I could tell you from that visit, but one man in particular made a huge impression on all of us. His name was Marcela, and he had previously been the treasurer of the Rwandan Bible Society. And we were visiting Rwanda 20 years after the awful genocide in 1994, when over a period of around 100 days, almost 1 million men, women, boys and girls were slaughtered, mainly Tutsis, slaughtered by the Hutu tribe. And it was just awful. Marcelan was a Tutsi, and he told us his story. We sat in the minibus outside a church one afternoon where something like 5,000 people had been slaughtered during that awful time. And he told us his story. He lost over 90 of his own family, wider family, including his own parents, his wife and his child. And his name was on a hit list by the Interahamwe, the killing groups. And on one particular occasion, he was fleeing from a troop of rebels who were chasing him. They knew where he was. They'd hunted him from the village into the scrubland, the neighbouring scrubland, and he was running for his life. And he came to a clearing, which was a dead end, effectively. And he knew he couldn't go back because the Interahamwe with their machetes were right behind him. He couldn't go to right or left because of the thick thorn scrubland. The only way was ahead, but out of the brush ahead of him appeared a snake. Now, there's lots of snakes in Rwanda, but this particular snake is the most venomous of them all. One bite from the snake and you die within minutes. There is no hope. And the snake looked balefully at him for a few minutes. And he thought, well, I can't go back. I face certain death. If I go back, I face certain death if I approach this snake, but that is better than facing the machetes and possibly a lingering death. But before he could take a step forward and, in a sense, challenge the snake turned and slithered away into the undergrowth. And I remember Marcelan saying, you know, our experience sometimes was that animals were more merciful than humans, and that was his experience that day. An incredible story. Marcelan escaped, and his story is remarkable because he has been instrumental in a lot of the work in Rwanda in reconciliation, helping that country to recover from its terrible, terrible past. So back to the laments. Psalm 13 begins, "O Lord, how long will you forget me? How long will you look the other way?" And you can almost hear David crying in his despair and his distress. But the remarkable thing about that psalm is, if you read it, by the end of the psalm, he's able to say this: "But despite everything, but I will trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he has been so good to me. That was Marslan's experience. With God's help, he was able to say those words. Those were his words too. I trust in your unfailing love, despite everything that had happened. Now, we're not going to experience the kind of genocide that Rwanda experienced, but even in some of those difficult times, let me urge you to go back to the Psalms, in particular maybe have a look at Psalm 13. If you're struggling today, if things are getting you down, if there's a black cloud hanging over you, go to Psalm 13. Read Psalm 13 and let it speak to you and encourage you so that eventually you can come to that point of saying, I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because you have been so good to me. May that be your experience. God bless you.